On Monday, May the 6th, the 50th edition of the MET Fashion Gala will take place at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. The MET Fashion Gala is a charity event and fundraiser opening of the fashion exhibition that each year is shown in the museum. And in this episode of the podcast, the goal is to disclose its finest bits. My name is Luigi de Blasi, and this is Waiting For, the podcast that tells you what are you waiting for. First point. What is the Met Gala? In an important distinction that must be made, the exhibition is organized by the Costume Institute, owned by the Met, while the charity event is organized by the American fashion magazine, Vogue. The charity is then devolved to both the Costume Institute and other New York charitable institutions. For this year's edition, the gala hosts will be Zendaya, Jennifer Lopez, Bad Bunny, and Chris Hemsworth. The guests usually explore the exhibition before sitting down together for dinner. Until the night before the event, the guest list is kept in secret. No one is really able to follow bit by bit what happens for dinner, as what is streamed every year is only the red carpet entrance of the VIPs to the event. There is also a no-phone policy, for which the guests should spend no time on their phones and social media after entering the gala. Second point, the theme of the exhibition by the Costume Institute. And the theme for the 2024 Costume Institute exhibition is Sleeping Beauties, Reawakening Fashion. What is this about? The first relevant topic is time. The garments exposed will span along the latest 400 years of history, and it will be made possible thanks to creative and immersive technological apparels designed to experience the smells, sounds, textures, and motions of garments that are no longer fit for being worn. Other pieces featured will include designs by Elsa Schiaparelli, Yves Saint Laurent, Christian Dior, Hubert de Givenchy, and many other creators. There are then many aspects that link time to another theme. Given that time itself causes, on the one hand, the garments to be fragile and, on the other hand, fashion to be ephemeral, furthermore giving it a sense of birth and renewal, this other theme, which is nature, is what must play a big part in the exhibition. It actually unites all the 250 garments and accessories exposed, some of these very rarely seen before, with iconography related to this second theme. So how will the exhibition be organized? It will be structured around approximately 15 historically significant and aesthetically beautiful pieces, which are in fact the Sleeping Beauties of the title, as they are too fragile ever to be worn again. Instead of fulfilling their original worn function, these pieces, including an Elizabethan bodice from the 17th century and a silk satin ball gown by the English couturier Charles Frederick Worth from 1887, will instead be displayed by a Pepper's Ghost, which will include video animation, light projection, soundscaping, AI, and other forms of sensory stimulation. What is a Pepper's Ghost? It consists of an illusion technique used in theater, cinema, and other amusement places, in which an image of an object off stage is projected so that it appears to be in front of the audience. The exhibition will be shaped around three main zones: land, sea, and sky. It traces evolving attitudes to the natural world through craft and the manipulation of natural materials to create garments. The issues of sustainability and regenerative forms of production will throw the historic side of the exhibition to the contemporary times, as recently acquired pieces from some of modern fashion's most innovative creators will also be exposed. The exhibition will last until September 2nd, 2024. Bolton & New, its curators, said of the exhibition, "It is very much an ode to nature and the emotional poetics of fashion." This is what spoils the third point of this podcast, which leads us back to the gala by taking a look at its dress code. And the dress code for the 50th edition of the MET Fashion Gala is The Garden of Time. The Garden of Time is a short story written in 1962 from the American author J.G. Ballard. I will make the PDF of this short story available for download in a link somewhere in the description of this episode of the podcast. A count called Alex and his wife, whose name is not written, are living in a luxurious villa with plenty of books and a harpsichord included. Right from the start of the story, he starts to foresee an army approaching through the horizon. In their terrace, they have these time flowers. The reason why they call it this way is that once Axel snaps one of these flowers off the stem, the army recedes for a part of their path, although advancing still. The couple can't though impede the army to advance, and, brief quotes, both of them knew that the garden was dying. There are two very powerful links. One is between the couple and the garden, with the garden factually generally being a metaphor for the pair. Then, quoting two sentences from page 5, the first one is, taking the stem between her jeweled fingers, and the second one, the countess clasping the brilliant dying jewel, with the brilliant dying jewel referring to the last flower remaining. Looking in depth, the epithet, the jeweled fingers, and the metaphor of the brilliant dying jewel here do link both the countess and the flower. Epithet, what on earth is this word? In rhetoric, an epithet is an adjective or adjectival phrase that characterizes a place, a thing, or a person that helps make the characteristics of this thing more prominent. The fingers are not just fulfilled by jewels, they are instead jeweled. I would like therefore to bring this episode to an end with the final floral and jeweled but unhappy ending to the story. Beginning of quotes. By evening, as the sun fell behind the house, they were both tired and dusty, and neither had spoken to the other all day. When his wife moved towards the music room, Axel called her back. "Tonight we'll pick the flowers together, my dear," he said to her, Emily. "One for each of us." He peered, only briefly, over the wall. They could hear, less than a kilometer away, the great dull roar of the rugged army, the ring of iron and lush, pressing on towards the house. Quickly, Axel plucked his flower, about no bigger than a sapphire. As it flickered softly, the tumult outside momentarily receded, then began to gather again. Shutting his ears to the clamor, Axel looked around at the villa, counted the 6 columns in the portico, then gazed out across the lawn at the silver disk of the lake, its bowl reflecting the last evening lights, and at the shadows moving between the tall trees, lengthening across the crisp turf. He lingered over the bridge where he and his wife had stood arm in arm for so many summers. Axel! The tumult outside roared into the air. 1,000 voices bellowed only 20 or 30 meters away. A stone flew over the wall and landed among the thyme flowers, snapping several of the brittle stems. The Countess ran towards him as a farther barrage rattled along the wall. Then a heavy tile whirled through the air over their heads and crushed into one of the conservatory windows. Axel! He put his arms around her, straightening his silk cravat when her shoulder brushed it between his lapels. Quickly, my dear, the last flower. He led her down the steps and through the garden. Taking the stem between her jeweled fingers, she snapped it cleanly, then cradled it within her palms. For a moment, the tumult lessened slightly, and Axel collected himself. In the vivid light sparkling from the flower, he saw his wife's white, frightened eyes. Hold it as long as you can, my dear, until the last grain dies. Together they stood on the terrace, the Countess clasping the brilliant diamond jewel, the air closing in upon them as the voices outside mounted again. The mob was battering at the heavy iron gates, and the whole villa shook with the massive impact. While the final glimmer of light sped away, the Countess raised her palms to the air, as if releasing an invisible bird. Then, in a final access of courage, put her hands in her husband's, her smile as radiant as the vanished flower. "Oh, Axel," she cried. Like a sword, the darkness swooped down across them. In conclusion, the exhibition looks really attractive, even for someone who has never dealt with the topic of fashion. All the cultural links are very well curated. Highlighting another quote from the curators, beginning of quote, "Fashion is one of the most emotional artistic forms because of its connection to the body. It is imbued with memory and emotions, and we relate to it very much via our senses. One thing I hope this show will activate is that sensorial appreciation of fashion." Thanks for your time. If you like what you heard, please don't miss the chance to support my job by following this podcast on Spotify and following the Instagram page Elsa De Blasi. I would like to thank the sources to this episode of the podcast, which are the articles from the websites of Vogue magazine and the Met Museum.